facial recognition system makes mistakes, and those mistakes disproportionately impact African Americans and others of color. A facial recognition system appears to me to be a direct violation of Americans' First Amendment and Fourth Amendment liberties, and a facial recognition system also seems to me to threaten, as Ms. Garvey said, Americans' due process rights. And all three of those things, all that happens in a country with 50 million surveillance cameras. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
How does the FBI get the initial database in the first place?
So the FBI has massive databases, and they use external partners as well. So one of the things they do is they use state driver's license databases. I think up to 18 states have been reportedly used by the FBI. They use passport photos.
Who made the decision to allow the FBI to access those 18 or 19 states' DMV databases?
Apparently there were conversations and memorandums between those states, but in one state, for example in Vermont, it was actually against state law. And ultimately, the Attorney General had to suspend that use.
So my question is, did the state legislature and the governor actually pass legislation saying it was okay for the FBI to access every single person in their state who has a driver's license? Did that happen in those 18 or 19 states that gave that permission to the FBI?
No, and that's the problem. This was all in secret, essentially.
So some unelected person at the FBI talks to some unelected person at the state level, and they say, yeah, go ahead. Here's, in the case of Ohio, we got 11 million people, most of them drive. Here's 10 million folks who you can now have this database.
Right, and the people who wanted a driver's license many times didn't know these systems were operating either.
That was my next point. And the individual themselves did not give permission. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So the individual didn't give permission. Were there any kind of notification at the time they go in to get their picture and get their driver's license? Oh, with my 4 years, I got to get my new tag or my new license. Any type of information given to them, oh, by the way, this may go to the FBI?
I think by and large, people have been unaware of these systems and how they operate.
So the individual's unaware. The people they elect to represent them in their state government did not make the decision. That information is going to the FBI, which scares me, particularly in the context of, I mean, you can use your example. Some people would say, do you really want J. Edgar Hoover having this capability? I would argue today, do we really want someone like Peter Strzok with the things we've learned that he engaged in and the bias that he had? And no one in an elected position made the determination.
That's right.
Okay. Now, when the FBI has this and they're going to access this database, what kind of standard do they have to put in place before they can access it? Is there any type of probable cause, any type of process, due process, whatever you want to call it, anything they go through before they can access the database?
They don't have to get a warrant or meet a probable cause warrant standard, and I think there are questions that they aren't even notifying people in cases where it's relevant in their case.
Okay. 50 million cameras, violation of people's First Amendment, Fourth Amendment liberties, due process liberties, all kinds of mistakes. Those mistakes disproportionately impact African Americans, and no due process, no elected officials gave the okay from the states for the federal government, FBI, to use it. Does the FBI share any of this information with other federal agencies?
They have partnerships with federal agencies, for example, like the State Department, to scan through their passport photos. But frankly, we don't know very much about how other federal agencies are using it.
Do we know if the IRS has access to this kind of information? Can they have any kind of partnership with the FBI or any other federal agency to access this data?
I don't know the answer to that question with regards to the IRS.
That scares me as well. So I guess the fundamental question is, I think you're all there. There should probably be some kind of restrictions. Mr. Ferguson, I think you've said we should just ban it, right?
I think we should ban face surveillance, which is the use of these technologies without any kind of individualized suspicion. And I think there should be regulation about face recognition technologies in certain ways. But I do think that there are members of this panel who believe that at this moment there should be a moratorium. And again, my position is if we are not going to regulate, we should push the pause button on this technology now because it is as dangerous as you are expressing.
Seems to me it's time for a timeout. Timeout. 50 million cameras, real concerns. I guess what troubles me too is just the fact that no one in an elected position made a decision on the fact that these 18 states, I think the chairman said this is more than half the population of the country. That is scary. particularly in light of what we've seen. That you got to remember the framework. It was just, what, 8 years ago, the IRS targeted people for their political belief. They did it. We know you can, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, this should concern us all. And this is why I appreciate the chairman's work on this issue and the bipartisan nature of this hearing. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Supreme Court case Brady versus Maryland held that the government is required to release to the defense potentially exculpatory evidence that they come upon when prosecuting the case. And I'm worried that facial recognition technology presents a threat to that. For instance, Ms. Giuliani, if multiple photos are returned during a search of the database to the FBI and they narrow it down to a single suspect, does Brady require the FBI to share those other photos that were similar to the suspect in question?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it could be exculpatory evidence to know, for example, that an algorithm has a reliability problem, or that an algorithm returned, similar photos with indicating they could be the person. That could support a defense to say, look, I've been misidentified. There were other people who were similarly tagged by the system. And I think that one of the concerns is that we're not seeing Brady disclosures, and we're not really seeing notice. The FBI has used this stuff hundreds and thousands of times. There aren't thousands of cases in the court where we see defendants being informed about this. So where judges are not having even the opportunity to rule on some of these very critical issues.
Well, one of the concerning things, too, is that when a human makes an identification or a false identification, you can cross-examine the human. Were they drunk? Was it dark outside? How is their vision? Do they have prescription glasses? Were they wearing them? All of those things, but you can't cross-examine an algorithm. Does Ms. Garvey or Ms. Giuliani or Mr. Ferguson, anybody here, has the government been providing descriptions of how the algorithms work to the defense? Anybody
They have not. In speaking to public defenders around the country, we have found that they will usually not know if the algorithm was used in the first instance. Law enforcement agencies don't typically have access to the training data or to how the algorithms work as well, because these are private companies that have developed these systems, and it's considered a trade secret. So it may be that the law enforcement agency says they can't turn that over. So we have not seen public defenders having access. On your point about Brady, face recognition systems are designed to return multiple matches. The Washington County Sheriff's Office gave an example where a person with a 70% confidence was the person they landed up charging, even though the algorithm thought somebody else was at a 90% confidence. Essentially, the algorithm was playing witness, saying that I'm 90% confident it's this other guy, and yet the person who I'm 70% confident is the guy was the one who was charged. That's quintessentially Brady evidence.
I've got a couple minutes left. I want to pivot a little bit. We've talked about in the cases where facial recognition doesn't work, and it's very concerning, especially when it disproportionately affects minorities and when these algorithms are defective. But I'm worried about the case where they work 100% of the time, where there are no mistakes and nobody gets left out. Ms. Garvey, can you speak briefly to how China is using real-time facial surveillance?
Sure. We see China as a bit of a roadmap of what's possible with this technology in the absence of rules. And in the absence of rules, this is a system where everybody is enrolled in the back end, and there are enough cameras to allow law enforcement to track where somebody is anytime they show their face in public, to upload their photo and see where they've been over the last 2 weeks, be that public rallies or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or a rehab clinic. That information is now available at the click of a button or the upload of a photo. That's what face recognition looks like with no rules.
So do we have any evidence that any of the U.S. police departments or federal agencies are doing real-time monitoring of events or large events or using streams from cameras and monitoring them today?
Our research has found that at least 2 major jurisdictions, Chicago and Detroit, have purchased this capability and have paid to maintain it. Chicago says they do not use it. Detroit did not deny that they were using it. Theirs is designed to operate with Project Greenlight, which is specifically locations like, yes, gas stations and liquor stores, but also churches and clinics and schools.
Is there a minimum threshold of evidence or suspicion that's required before your face becomes one of the faces searched in real time or in one of these databases? Presently?
In no jurisdiction, there are rules around who lands up in the database. With few exceptions, in Missouri, for example, DMV records cannot be included, but by and large, there are no rules around this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back, balance of my time. Dr. Romine, you reported on the accuracy of the algorithms that NIST tested. You said they're 99 to 99.7% accurate. Did you test, well, first of all, that accuracy rating, I can imagine two ways the algorithm fails. One would be a false positive, and one would be failing to recognize an actual match. Which number are you reporting?
So for the, let me double check because I want to be sure that I get this right. The accuracy at 99.7, I believe, is false negative rates, but I'm going to have to double check and get back to you on that.
Okay, that'd be great. You can get back to me later. Did you test certain conditions like siblings, the accuracy for siblings?
We do have perhaps the most relevant data that I can give you is we do know that there is an impact on twins in the database or in the testing, whether they are identical twins or even fraternal twins can.
Let me give you the data
create
point
some-
I have. I have two sons. One's 2.5 years younger than the other. He can open his brother's phone. They don't look that much alike. They look like brothers. He furrows his eyebrows and changes the shape of his mouth to the way he thinks his brother looks, and he opens his phone every single time. So that accuracy is not 99%, that is 0%. Now that may be an older algorithm. I'm sure they've improved in a couple years since this happened. I want to submit for the record an article in Forbes by Thomas Brewer called "We Broke Into a Bunch of Android Phones with a 3D Printed Head."
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think these aren't as accurate, like for certain special conditions, like somebody wearing a mask or makeup or maybe a sibling, the accuracy does not approach or may not approach 99% with some of these algorithms. What do you think?
The situations you're describing are situations where there is intent to deceive, either through lack of liveness.
Do you think there's intent to deceive in the world?
I certainly do,
Yeah.
but what...
That's what we're worried about at TSA is intent to deceive, not the honest actor. But let me go to something else here. And this question is for Ms. Del Greco. The Supreme Court case Brady v. Maryland held that due process rights require government to promptly disclose potential exculpatory evidence with the defense. So in the case where multiple photos are returned, or there may be 9 possible matches, does the defense get access or knowledge that there were other possible matches? Let me give you an example. In a prior hearing, I had somebody testify to us that a sheriff's office gave an example where a person with 70% confidence was the person they ended up charging, even though the algorithm thought somebody else was at 90% confidence. So they charged the person that the algorithm said was 70% likely and passed over the one that was 90% likely in this case. Can you guarantee us that the FBI would provide that type of information to the defense?
First, the FBI doesn't make a match. We provide an investigative lead to our law enforcement partners. But with all evidence obtained during an investigation...
Do you ever provide more than one lead?
We provide more than one lead, sometimes, yes, sir.
Okay.
2 or more. It depends on the state. Some states want 20 candidates back, some want 2 back. Depends on their state system.
So does the defense get access to the knowledge that there were other leads? And do you assign a probability that the lead, or a confidence level with that facial recognition?
Well, I think the prosecution team must determine on a case-by-case basis.
So you're not sure if they always get that?
No, I'm not. We don't provide a true match, an identification back. It's up to the law enforcement entity to make that decision.
A quick question. How many photos does the FACE database have access to, including the state driver's license databases?
That changes daily. I don't have that, sir.
Is it in the millions, tens of millions?
I don't know, sir. I can provide that to you.
Do you have access to Kentucky's database?
I can check for you, sir. We do not. Yes, we do, sir.
Okay, so you have access to all the photographs in the driver's license database in Kentucky. Which elected official agreed to that?
I believe we worked with the state authorities in Kentucky to establish the MOU.
But not an elected official.
The state authority is public, and it's predetermined and established prior to face recognition.
You say the laws that you're relying on were passed before facial recognition became
They
viable.
were. They
Okay.
were, sir.
That's I think, a problem. All right, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.